Imagine a man who sees the world not for what it pretends to be, but for what it really is. A world where masks are worn like armor, where every handshake hides calculation, and where kindness is often strategy in disguise. That man was Niccolo Machiavelli. 5 centuries ago, he put into words what most people are too afraid to admit even to themselves, that beneath the fragile veil of morality, what truly governs human affairs is power, not justice, not truth, not even love, power. And the one who understands this, the one who dares to strip away illusions and play the game as it is, becomes untouchable. Now, imagine if Machiavelli were alive today. In this age of screens, propaganda, corporations, and manipulation, his clarity would slice through the noise like a blade. His lessons wouldn't just survive, they would dominate, because the rules of power haven't changed. They've only found new disguises. Let's walk into his mind. Let's strip away the polite lies of society, the glossy filters of modern morality, and face the raw mechanics of influence. You'll see how a man like Machiavelli would not just survive today, he would outsmart everyone. And he would do it by obeying rules that most people never dare to learn. Rules you'll feel in your bones as we uncover them, one after another, until you can no longer unsee how power really works. The first thing Machiavelli would tell you is this: never reveal the full truth of your intentions. People claim to value honesty, but what they really value is the story that flatters. They don't want raw truth, they want narratives that let them sleep at night. If you tell them everything, you surrender control. He would cloak his ambitions, drape them in half-truths, let others guess and project what they want onto him. Mystery is a weapon. In a world obsessed with oversharing, he would make silence feel like thunder. And then he'd remind you, loyalty is a mirage. In politics, in business, even in love, loyalty bends to interest. People will stand by you only as long as you serve their need, their pride, their profit. The moment the tide shifts, so will they. To expect loyalty is to walk into a trap. Machiavelli wouldn't resent this, he would use it. He would study what each person really wants and make sure that as long as they orbit him, they're getting just enough to keep them bound, not through promises, but through dependence. Because the one who feeds another's hunger controls the leash, no matter how invisible it seems. Here's the thing about power: it doesn't forgive hesitation. Machiavelli knew this centuries before psychologists gave it fancy names. He saw that the world bends to those who dare to act while others are still thinking. In modern times, this translates to striking fast, before doubt can creep in, before opponents can organize, before circumstances can change. The decisive man doesn't always make the right choice, but the hesitant man almost always loses. If you wait for certainty, you're already late. Machiavelli would never wait. He'd move, he'd seize, he'd commit, forcing others to respond to him. That's how control is taken. And yet, he was no brute. He understood the delicate mask of appearance. Because here's the paradox. While power belongs to those who dare, survival belongs to those who know how to hide it. He would present himself as virtuous, humble, even generous, because people need illusions to follow. They want to believe their leaders are noble. They want morality dressed in charisma. Machiavelli would give them exactly that performance while orchestrating his strategies behind the curtain. Today, he wouldn't be the loudest voice in the room. He'd be the one carefully shaping the loudest voice. He'd let others burn in the fire of attention while he directed the flames. Cruelty, he wrote, can be mercy if applied at the right time. Modern ears flinch at this, but think carefully. Is it more merciful to let chaos destroy thousands, or to use force once, sharply, and restore order? Machiavelli would argue that the well-timed use of severity prevents greater suffering. And in today's world, this doesn't always mean violence. It means making decisions that will hurt in the short term, but preserve strength in the long term. Cutting off alliances that drain you. Firing the one who poisons the team. Breaking ties before they strangle you. The cruelty of clarity is often the greatest mercy. And never forget, the masses are swayed not by facts, but by spectacle. Machiavelli knew that perception is stronger than truth. Today, with media as the battlefield, he would master the art of image. He wouldn't waste time proving he's right. He'd make sure people felt he was right. That's how leaders rise, not by logical arguments, but by crafting moments, symbols, and gestures that burn into memory. One image can erase 100 truths. One performance can rewrite a narrative. That's a law of power as old as time. And in today's world of endless feeds and short attention spans, it's not just true, it's absolute. Still, beneath all this, Machiavelli would never forget the most dangerous mistake of all: to trust too much in luck. Fortune, he said, is a river. It can flood and sweep you away, but it also creates currents you can ride. The wise man doesn't pray for luck. He builds dams, channels, and escapes. He prepares for storms before the sky darkens. In our time, this means building layers of protection, financial reserves, networks of allies, backups for every plan. He would never be caught unarmed by circumstance. To rely on luck is to surrender your crown to chaos. But perhaps the most unsettling rule he'd whisper is this: people don't really want freedom. They want security, they want guidance, they want someone who carries the burden of choice so they don't have to. Give them bread, give them hope, give them an enemy to blame, and they will trade their freedom willingly. Machiavelli saw this in the republics of his day, and you can see it now in corporations, in politics, in the way people cling to authority when life feels uncertain. Power belongs to the one who understands this hunger and feeds it while hiding the chains in velvet. He would also tell you, never fight a war you can't win. Pride destroys more rulers than weakness ever could. People step into battles because their ego is provoked, because they can't bear the thought of being underestimated. Machiavelli would laugh at that. He would step aside, let the proud destroy themselves, and then claim the spoils. The best victory is not always fought. It is often inherited after your enemies burn themselves alive. The patient wolf eats the wounded lion, and through it all, he'd live by a single pulse: control the narrative or be controlled by it. If people can't explain you, they will invent a story about you, and that story will rule your fate. Machiavelli would never let that happen. He'd seed his own myths, drop whispers, feed rumors, control the angles until what people believe about him serves his designs. Because in the end, perception is not just power, it is reality. What Machiavelli understood better than almost anyone is that human beings are predictable when stripped to their core drives. They crave safety, recognition, and a sense of belonging. That's why the one who provides these illusions can rule without chains. Think of it, a crowd doesn't need to be forced if they feel chosen. They don't rebel if they believe you are the shield between them and chaos. Machiavelli would never waste his energy ruling through constant fear alone. It burns too fast, too hot. Instead, he would mix it with admiration, sprinkling gestures of generosity when least expected. A calculated gift, a staged act of kindness, a public moment of humility. These are not born of sentiment, they are tactics. Because love, unlike fear, cannot be commanded. But admiration can be staged, and when combined with fear, it becomes unbreakable. He would teach you that enemies are more useful alive than dead, not because of mercy, but because an enemy defines you. Without opposition, you are invisible. With an enemy, you are necessary. In today's world, this could mean a rival politician, a competing company, or even a cultural force. Machiavelli would know how to amplify their existence, to let them bark louder, to paint them as the threat, and then to stand tall as the answer. Destroying an enemy outright robs you of contrast. Keeping them alive but contained gives you the perfect foil against which your image shines brighter. At the same time, he would warn you, never let an enemy grow too strong. A controlled rival is an asset. An unchecked rival becomes a cancer. If mercy is to be shown, it must always be the mercy of a blade that slices cleanly at the roots, never half-hearted, never leaving the seed of revenge. The cruelest mistake is to wound an enemy and let him live. That guarantees he will spend his days plotting your downfall. Better to strike once with precision than to strike 100 times without resolve. In this, Machiavelli was cold, but never uncertain. He'd also whisper another uncomfortable truth. Alliances are marriages of convenience, not bonds of blood. People ally with you because it serves them. When it no longer does, they will betray you without hesitation. So why pretend otherwise? Machiavelli would treat every alliance like a tool, useful, but never to be mistaken for eternal. And the clever ruler ensures that every ally depends on him more than he depends on them. The moment dependence flips, power begins to slip away. Here's what most people miss. Machiavelli did not glorify cruelty for cruelty's sake. He despised chaos. What he valued was control. His harshness was always in service of stability. Imagine him today, watching leaders cave to public opinion, swaying with trends, apologizing endlessly. He would scoff. To him, nothing destroys authority faster than appearing weak, uncertain, or dependent on the crowd's approval. People respect consistency more than confession. They respect a strong lie more than a weak truth. He would tell you, never explain too much, never defend yourself endlessly. The more you justify, the smaller you appear. Speak less, act more, let results silence critic. And yet he'd insist on this, never make yourself hated unnecessarily. Fear can keep order, but hatred rots the foundation. A ruler who is hated must look over his shoulder forever. That is no real power, that is prison. Better to be firm, feared for your strength, but respected for your fairness. This balance is delicate. Push too far, you create revolt. Stay too soft, you invite exploitation. The art of power is to stand like a storm, undeniable, awe-inspiring, but never cruel for cruelty's sake. Now consider another of his eternal laws. Fortune favors the bold, but it devours the reckless. What's the difference? Boldness is action guided by calculation. Recklessness is action drunk on ego. The bold man leaps because he has studied the terrain. The reckless man leaps because he loves the sound of his own roar. Machiavelli would thrive in this digital world where noise overwhelms thought. He would wait for others to exhaust themselves in constant displays, then step in with a single decisive move that cuts through the chaos. One well-timed strike achieves more than 1,000 frantic gestures. He would also see through the illusion of popularity. Many chase applause, thinking it equals power. But applause is fickle. It vanishes the moment the crowd is distracted by a new spectacle. True power lies not in being loved by everyone, but in being indispensable to the few who matter. A king does not need every peasant to adore him. He needs the generals, the merchants, the priests. In modern terms, this means knowing who holds leverage. The media gatekeepers, the financiers, the cultural influencers. Win them and the masses follow. Lose them and the masses scatter. Machiavelli would never chase universal love. He would secure critical loyalty and let the rest fall where it may. And there's something else. He understood the power of appearances over reality. He wrote that a ruler should seem merciful, faithful, humane, honest, and religious, even if he is none of these things. Why? Because people cannot see the hidden motives. They see only what is shown. Today, he would not just master public relations, he would weaponize every gesture on camera, every phrase in an interview, every smile on social media would be sculpted for effect. Behind closed doors, his calculations might be ruthless. But in the public eye, he would embody exactly the virtues people crave. This duality, the lion in private, the lamb in public, is the essence of survival. But perhaps the most chilling rule he'd insist upon is this: never become predictable. Predictability is death. Once people can anticipate your moves, they can outmaneuver you. Machiavelli would weave unpredictability into his very persona. One day generous, the next distant. One moment approachable, the next untouchable. His unpredictability would keep everyone off balance, always guessing, never secure. And while they tried to interpret him, he would already be 5 steps ahead. The uncertain man commands attention. The predictable man is forgotten. Yet for all his ruthless clarity, Machiavelli believed in one quiet truth. Great men are remembered not for what they possess, but for what they build. Glory to him was not wealth alone, it was legacy. He saw rulers who grasped for riches and comfort fade into obscurity, but those who carved new orders, who reshaped the destiny of their people, lived forever in history's ink. In our age, this would mean something beyond power for its own sake. It would mean creating systems, institutions, movements that outlive the individual. He would not settle for being rich. He would aim to be unforgettable. And here is the paradox. To become unforgettable, you must often be willing to be hated in your time. Those who tell comforting lies are loved in the moment and forgotten in the next. Those who wield uncomfortable truths may be cursed while alive, but their names echo centuries later. Machiavelli himself was slandered, exiled, ridiculed. Yet his words survive while his enemies' names rot in silence. That is the price of true power, to be willing to embrace the storm of the present for the immortality of the future. So the rules unfold like iron threads, weaving a net that catches the careless and crowns the cunning. Never show your full hand. Never rely on loyalty. Act decisively. Appear virtuous while hiding the wolf within. Strike cruelty once and cleanly, not in endless drips. Use enemies to sharpen your image. Balance fear with admiration. Avoid hatred. Win the few who matter and the many will follow. Stay unpredictable. Build legacy, not comfort. Each law bleeds into the next, forming not a list but a way of seeing, a way of breathing, a way of ruling. Machiavelli would remind you that the battlefield of power is not always fought in open spaces. It is often hidden in whispers, in the subtle movements of influence that most people never notice. The strong man who beats his chest can win a crowd, but the one who controls what that crowd whispers tomorrow, he owns the future. Control of language, control of symbols, control of narrative. This is subtler than force, but far more enduring. Today, where words are carried like wildfire across the world in seconds, he would know that one carefully planted phrase can outlast 1,000 speeches. What matters is not only what you say, but what others repeat. And if they repeat your words, even when cursing you, they are still carrying your fire. He would never waste his energy fighting on all fronts. Machiavelli understood that to attempt everything is to accomplish nothing. The wise ruler chooses his battleground, focuses his strength where it matters most, and ignores the rest. Imagine him today, watching people exhaust themselves chasing every insult, every distraction, every petty rivalry online. He would laugh. To him, that is weakness, being pulled by the currents of others instead of steering your own. True power is selective. It knows when to ignore, when to absorb, and when to strike with precision. A ruler is not remembered for how many battles he fought, but for how many he won. Another of his iron rules: never let others grow accustomed to your generosity. Give too often, and your gifts are no longer seen as gifts. They become expected, like water from a well. Gratitude fades, entitlement grows, and the moment you stop giving, you are branded cruel. Machiavelli saw this long ago. Men forget the good you've done as soon as it stops flowing, but they never forget a wound. So the wise ruler gives rarely, but dramatically. He makes his generosity memorable, not routine. A single calculated act of mercy can inspire more loyalty than 100 constant favors, because what is rare is treasured, what is common is discarded. And yet he'd teach you another paradox. Sometimes, to secure loyalty, you must bind others through their own guilt. A man who owes you nothing may abandon you easily, but a man who has betrayed with your permission or sinned under your shadow becomes tied to you forever. His shame is your leash. Machiavelli would know how to exploit this without words. He'd offer opportunities where men compromise themselves in small ways, then bind them with silence. Not blackmail, dependency. Because the one who holds another's secret holds his soul. Machiavelli would have thrived in the game of appearances, but he would have been merciless in the game of weakness. Never reveal your desperation. Never let the scent of need escape you. People are predators. They may smile, but their instincts sharpen the moment they sense you lack option. A desperate man becomes disposable. A desperate man becomes a bargaining chip. Machiavelli would stand like stone, even if the ground beneath him was shaking. His rule was clear: better to appear strong and conceal your wounds than to beg for pity. Pity is fleeting, respect endures, and he would tell you this: never place your safety entirely in the hands of others. Relying on mercenaries, he wrote, is the doom of rulers. In modern times, this principle stretches beyond soldier. It means never outsourcing the core of your survival. Do not let your entire reputation rest in another's hand. Do not let your wealth be controlled entirely by another's system. Do not let your influence rely solely on someone else's platform. Allies, partners, tools, they are useful, but if they vanish, you must remain whole. Otherwise, you are not powerful, you are a hostage. He would look at the endless hunger of today's society for validation, likes, applause, constant approval, and he would shake his head. Power does not beg for recognition. It creates its own recognition. The man who needs applause is already enslaved by it. Machiavelli would use applause, yes, but he would never need it. He would take silence as a weapon, absence as a statement, retreat as a strategy. Because sometimes the most powerful move is not presence, but withdrawal. When you leave the stage at your peak, the echo of your absence speaks louder than 100 more words. Then there is this brutal truth. A leader must sometimes commit acts he cannot justify in the moment, but that history will absolve. Weak men paralyze themselves with the need to appear moral now. They waste opportunities, fearing criticism. Machiavelli would strike, endure the condemnation, and wait for time to rewrite the story. Because time always does. What seems ruthless today becomes necessity tomorrow. History does not remember the tears of the crowd. It remembers who carved the path. The one who hesitates to stain his hands often leaves no mark at all. But he would never allow cruelty to become habit. Cruelty repeated becomes chaos. Instead, he would consolidate. One decisive moment of severity to cut away rot, followed by stability. He knew the people would forgive severity if it was quick, necessary, and followed by peace. What they will never forgive is endless cruelty that becomes part of daily life. Strike once like lightning, then let the calm sky return. That is how fear becomes respect instead of hatred. He would also insist, guard your reputation more than your body. Because once reputation is destroyed, survival becomes nearly impossible. Men forgive injuries to the flesh, but not insults to honor. In our time, reputation is not simply what others say, it is what spreads. And what spreads faster than truth? Lies. Machiavelli would not waste his breath denying every slander. He would instead drown it beneath louder stories, redirecting attention until the lie fades into irrelevant. Reputation, he knew, is not managed by reaction, it is sculpted by redirection. And here is a principle few dare to grasp. It is safer to be feared than loved, but safest of all is to be both. Love alone is fragile, fear alone is unstable. But the rare leader who commands both admiration and awe, he is untouchable. To achieve this balance requires an almost inhuman mastery. Too much leniency, you lose respect. Too much terror, you breed rebellion. Machiavelli would walk this razor edge deliberately, showing just enough mercy to soften fear, just enough strength to harden love. Few can do this. That is why few hold power for long. He would never forget the value of deception. Not deception for its own sake, but deception as armor. To reveal everything is to walk naked into war. To conceal, to mislead, to confuse, that is to fight with a shield as well as a sword. Even nature, he would say, thrives on deception. The predator hides in the grass, the snake mimics the branch. Why should man be any different? He would disguise his intentions, feign weakness, stage vulnerability, anything to draw others into comfort before he strikes. The one who never deceives is already defeated by those who do. But above all, Machiavelli would insist that greatness demands risk. No empire was ever built by caution alone. No legacy was ever carved by safety. Fortune, he wrote, favors the bold. And boldness in his eyes was not recklessness, it was controlled fire. It was the willingness to act when others freeze, to endure when others break, to sacrifice comfort for a vision greater than survival. In this, Machiavelli speaks directly to you. Do not dream of power if you are unwilling to risk. Do not whisper of legacy if you cannot bear scars. To outsmart everyone today, you must walk the path few dare to walk, the path where fear becomes fuel, where morality becomes strategy, where survival becomes art. And so the rules sharpen, each cutting deeper than the last. Speak less, act more. Appear noble, but be ruthless when necessary. Strike with precision, not habit. Give rarely, but memorably. Use enemies, never trust alliances blindly. Hide your desperation, guard your independence, and master the currents of narrative. Balance fear with admiration. Risk when others retreat. Each is not separate, they weave together, forming a way of life, a code of power, a manual for survival in a world that pretends to be ruled by morality but is truly ruled by will. If Machiavelli were alive today, he would walk among us unnoticed at first. He would not announce himself with grandeur. He would listen. He would observe. He would learn your habits, your fears, your weaknesses. And then when you least expect it, he would begin moving pieces, small at first, invisible to most eyes, until entire rooms bent toward his will without even knowing why. That is the essence of power, not loudness, not noise, not declarations, but influence so deep it feels like gravity. One of his most final, most unshakable rules was this: never build your strength on the approval of the crowd. Crowds are fickle. Today they cheer, tomorrow they curse. Today they crown, tomorrow they crucify. But build your strength on structures, alliances, wealth, institutions, legacies, and you are harder to uproot. The applause of the masses is intoxicating, but Machiavelli would treat it as wine, something to sip, never to depend on. Dependence on applause is a slow suicide. Dependence on structure is the only guarantee of survival. He would remind you of the art of timing. A ruler who moves too early is ignored. A ruler who moves too late is overrun. The rare genius moves at the exact moment when hesitation still binds others, but opportunity is already ripe. Timing cannot be taught, but it can be trained through patience, observation, restraint. Machiavelli would never chase every opportunity. He would stalk them, let them ripen, then seize them in silence. Because the man who knows when to wait and when to strike, he is unstoppable. And here lies one of his harshest truths. Most men are simple. They hunger for security, they fear loss, they crave recognition. Appeal to these instincts and you can lead them anywhere. This does not mean people are weak, it means they are human. Machiavelli never despised humanity, he studied it. He accepted that the human heart does not change, and that is why his rules still cut today. Because technology shifts, nations rise and fall, but the hunger for safety, love, pride, these remain the same. To understand them is to understand power itself. He would warn you never to grow soft in comfort. Comfort dulls the edge. A ruler who surrounds himself with luxury forgets the hunger that made him powerful. He becomes fat in spirit, slow in judgment, weak in vigilance. Comfort is the silent assassin of ambition. Machiavelli would keep the fire alive by discipline, by constant vigilance, by surrounding himself not with flatterers but with men who sharpen him. The courtier who only praises weakens the king. The advisor who dares to speak truth strengthens him. And the ruler wise enough to know the difference, that ruler endures. There is another principle too often overlooked: succession. Power without a plan for its transfer is fragile. Machiavelli would plan beyond his own life. He would build not only for himself, but for continuity, systems that outlast the man, ideas that survive the body. Because true greatness is not what you hold while alive, but what continues when you are gone. Think of it, emperors rise and fall, but their empires remain. Names die, but institutions endure. Machiavelli would not only outsmart his rivals, he would outsmart time. And then he would turn to you and say, all of this, every rule, every principle, every strategy, it means nothing if you do not first master yourself. Because the greatest enemy you will ever face is not your rival, not your critic, not your betrayer. It is your own weakness, your impatience, your fear, your pride, your hunger for validation. Machiavelli would insist that before you can rule others, you must rule yourself. Power is lost not because of external enemies, but because of internal collapse. A man who cannot command his own desires will never command an empire. And this is where his voice becomes almost prophetic. He would whisper that the modern world is a stage and everyone is acting. Most act unconsciously, stumbling through roles they did not choose. But a few, the rare few, learn to write the script. They control not only their performance, but the performance of others. They direct the play unseen. These are the Machiavellians of our time. Not villains, not heroes, director. The crowd will never know their names, but their fingerprints shape history. Machiavelli's 21 rules of power are not a list to memorize. They are a mirror. They force you to see the world not as it pretends to be, but as it is. They strip away illusions until you are left with the raw mechanics of survival, ambition, and influence. Most will reject them. They will cling to the comfort of lies, telling themselves the world is ruled by fairness, kindness, or luck. But those who dare to accept the rules, even if they choose not to play by them, those are the ones who see clearly. And to see clearly is the first step toward power. So ask yourself, what do you want? To live gently, to obey illusions, to walk with the crowd, or to see through the mask, to master yourself, to carve your own place in the chaos? Machiavelli offers no mercy for the indecisive. To glimpse his truths is to bear responsibility. You cannot unsee them. You cannot return to innocence. Once you know how the game is played, you either play or you are played. And if he stood here now, speaking not in ink but in breath, he would tell you one final thing. Power is not evil. Power is not good. Power is the instrument through which men shape their fate. To reject it is to surrender your life to those who will wield it over you. To embrace it is to take the pen from their hands and write your own story. The choice, as always, is yours. But understand this, history does not remember the hesitant. It remembers the bold, the cunning, the relentless. It remembers those who built empires, toppled tyrants, reshaped nations. It remembers the ones who dared to see the world not as they wished it to be, but as it was, and acted anyway. That is why Niccolo Machiavelli,